Good afternoon.
Hey, Robin.
What should we talk about?
We already decided what we were going to talk about. So we're going to talk about Vibe Camp, which is where we've been for the past 4 days. Uh, so would you just describe Vibe Camp in like a few sentences?
As
Yeah, we're both
proven
wearing
by
our badges. Okay.
okay, it's a campground, and it has things like a campground would have: a place to eat, fireplaces, a pool, places to walk in the woods, cabins to sleep in, and various rooms in which you can have various events, including folk dancing, lock picking, dancing of other sorts, speeches being given, advice, all sorts of um, meeting, friend group meetings, like speed trending, I guess it was, those sorts of events. And perhaps the distinctive feature is the community that it was pitched to attract, which was at some level rationalists or nerds or autists, but a subgroup of those perhaps that were self-identified as less happy with previous versions of that community and more wanting to be emotional and spontaneous and just feeling focused on their feelings. This is the name Vibe Camp then indicates this idea that they are interested in vibing, in having good feelings and paying attention to those. And this is a sort of an event that lets them focus on that together. And I gotta say, I thought it was kind of successful in that by those criteria.
Hey, you tweeted about that. You said that the the vibe that was sold to you was in fact delivered. So what was it like returning to the non-vibe world after Vibe Camp?
Well, in some sense, it's just like the usual returning to life after camp. So, I mean, one sense is like this is a camp that successfully achieves the camp experience, and you're going back to the real world after camp. And in some sense, yeah, for decades, people have honed and developed the idea of a camp experience, and this achieved, a lot of that. Then the question is like, how is it different? What else does it have other than a usual camp?
For me, it was very different than the usual camp experience. I generally find camping either boring or uncomfortable or both, usually both, because camping is about experiencing nature, which I tend not to find that interesting. And also, experiencing nature tends to be uncomfortable because nature is uncomfortable. Um, and so I'm going to list the things I did at Vibe Camp because I have them written down. Um, and you said some of them, but like Thursday, I did speed friending. Then I went to dinner. Then I went to Ayla's live Twitter polls, and then Ayla's interview of you on Friday. After brunch, you and I sat and had like a series of long conversations with people, anyone who came up to us. And then we went for a walk with a subset of those people. I went swimming. We ate a giant whole roast lamb. One person ate the lamb eyeballs, though it was not either of us who ate lamb eyeballs. Then we went to dinner. Then we did folk dancing. Then we sat around the campfire for a while. Then we went to bed before anyone else at Vibe Camp because we were the oldest people at Vibe Camp. Saturday, in the morning I finished my novel. We went to brunch. We played the game Imperial, which is your favorite game and quickly becoming my favorite game, with a couple of other Vibe campers. We did an escape room. I went swimming again. We had dinner. We went to this spectacle performance called Dating Show to Save the World, which was good, but we left early. For me, it was a little too loud. Then we like sat at the pool and talked, went to bed. And then on Sunday, there were closing ceremonies. And then I interviewed a ton of people with a view to doing this podcast with you and having some sense of other people's perspective on it. Okay, that was my Vibe Camp experience. So like that's really different from camping. Camping mostly camping doesn't include most of those things. It doesn't include like unusual formats for having social interactions.
So I have this experience from long ago that as an isolated nerd, I didn't like parties so much because the sort of people and things people did at parties just didn't go well with me. And then once I moved to Silicon Valley and found lots of nerds, I liked parties. did the things that happened at parties that different? I'm not so sure. It might be just I liked parties once I was interacting with people more like me. So that may be, maybe this is just about what it's like to be around people more like you.
One thing that, so I'll tell you a few of the things that people said to me when I interviewed them. So a lot of people said like they had found their tribe or found people who were similar to them. Um, I wonder whether when weird people like find each other and like hang out with each other, what's going on is that they're all like enjoying one another's weirdness, or whether they're sort of retreating to a common denominator of humanity where you're just kind of open and friendly. And so you're available for interacting with anyone, even people to whom you are dissimilar. Because in my view, like it's actually pretty common for weird people to think that they're similar to other weird people, where they tend actually not. I think you and I are not, that we're both weird. We're not very similar. We're probably more dissimilar than to people who are, you know, like even than we are to some of the more normal people that we surround ourselves with.
Right. Yes.
So I'll say some of the things that people said. I wrote them down. So like here's some things that people said. They said, I can walk up to people in any group and feel confident that things will go well if I join their group. That was something someone said to me. They said everyone's inclined to have a long conversation about any topic presented to them, with no time wasted to reach depth. Okay. So there's a kind of openness and a kind of, I did find that there was less small talk. Like someone might be like, where are you from? Chicago. Okay. And then we would start talking about something, not like a 20-minute thing of like discussing the last time they were in Chicago and the last time I were in wherever they came from. So there's a kind of, people said that it was socially smooth for them, in that it was like easier for them to engage socially than it would be otherwise. But again, I think that's most likely not because people were like them, but because people were being extra nice and extra open and extra friendly.
I think this is very plausible. So if I go to my simple example of me not liking parties, I expect the main reason I didn't like parties before I met other nerds was that I felt rejected by them. That is, that they looked at me and they said, "Gee, he's kind of nerdy. Let's stay away from him."
Maybe you were rejected by them.
Yes,
Maybe
right.
you
Yeah,
felt
yes,
that's true. Yeah.
right. But so that might have been the main dynamic. It was less about how compatible we are and more just about rejecting people on the basis of similarity. And then at an event where weirdos all get together, if they'll just all accept each other, then it's less about them being similar to each other and more about them using this shared sense of being weird and rejected to then have a place where they are more accepting.
In like the second book, Plato's Republic, Glaucon says he's articulating a view that he says he doesn't agree with, but which and he's kind of channeling somebody else. And he says, it's weak people who would agree to all these like norms of justice and friendliness. This is Glaucon. This is Glaucon's attributing this to the bad guy. This is the bad guy view that I certainly don't have, or whatever. But so, do you think this kind of niceness is like a tactic of desperation? It's sort of like, I can't win at this competitive game, so I'm going to play this other like cooperative game.
In part, but I do think there is some similarities and they can be focused on. So as you say, the less interest in small talk, that's not just a fact about inclusiveness, right? That is a feature of them being more similar to each other.
But everyone says they hate small talk.
But some people are willing to drop it.
But maybe everybody would be willing to drop it if everybody else were willing to drop it. It's sort of like everyone also says it's nice to be nice. Maybe you feel like you can't be nice because other people aren't being nice, whatever.
So then maybe the desperation here induces people to be willing to make some changes like that they otherwise would be reluctant to make.
Right. So, okay. I came up with this axis along which to divide vibe campers. As a result of my conversations, I divided them into intellectual vibe campers and emotional vibe campers. So emotional vibe campers are primarily looking for having like strong emotional connections with other people. Often they specifically expressed interest in nonverbal intimacy, like sitting next to or near someone and connecting to them without talking or touching them. But also having strong emotional responses, like they spoke sort of positively of the fact that they cried at Vibe Camp, or that they felt elated, right? So they were there for the.
I just lost you for a minute.
Okay, but presumably, it still records that part. Is that true? Or
I
no?
hope so. I hope
Okay,
so.
maybe not because it's recording on your end. So
No, it should be. It's probably recording on both ends, but we're not
okay.
sure. But in any case,
Okay.
you said, but I didn't hear.
Yeah.
You said there was the people, non-intellectuals, who are focused on
These emotional bonds, often without talking and having
right.
Strong feeling, strong, both connecting to others, but also feeling strong emotions. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's the intellectual vibe campers, and they were interested in like a specific set of topics. They were interested in, demographic collapse or the AI takeover, or futurism, rationalism, etc., charter cities, and they wanted to talk about those specific topics to other people who are also interested in those topics. So I feel like those are like the two populations that were at Vibe Camp, though many people belonged in both of these categories, and I'm sure many people belonged in neither of them. It was just like, as I talked to people, that's how I ended up classifying. And I also think, all of those people, there were also other things that they were interested in that are maybe more true of a generic, 28-year-old. The group I was talking to decided the median age was around 28. So things like partying, athletic stuff, creative stuff, right? So fun, everyone was there to have fun and to do fun things. But then there were these two, I would say, distinctive interests in the emotional and the intellectual. So I'll just let you comment on that.
A story I heard people telling, which I guess I believe, is that this event and its structure and its participants are somewhat of a reaction to an overreach they saw at previous rationality events, where because people were more autistic or nerdy, etc., that they were leaning into this identity in the other events, and then they, were about overcoming biases and being rational and having arguments, and then even pushing heavier to have an effect on the world through their rationality, through effective altruism or AI risk or being startups. And so the previous rationality community had sort of a style of being pushy about their rationality and being ambitious with it and pushing people to sort of have a rationality stance toward the world and their careers and things like that. And that was seen as being going too far and neglecting emotions and feelings and fun. And this was a conscious reaction to that. And so these two groups you are describing, it might be the idea as well, they were emphasizing one of the groups too much. And as a result, perhaps having a bad gender ratio or other sorts of ratios of types of people, that they would more want to now include a wider range of people and styles, and that would be a healthier environment, even for the people who are most nerdy and want to discuss and argue, because they also need these other things in their lives. They need some fun, some mating, and some emotions. And the idea here was that, it's a bit of a retrenchment in a sense. This often happens in many social groups or whatever. There's some sort of a ideal, and they push hard toward an ideal, and then they go too far, and there needs to be some sort of a pulling back of saying, no, that went too far, let's pull back. I see this happening in startups. I see this happening in communes or religions, ideologies, etc. Often they just try to push as far as they can. There's often a competition to see who can push farther. And then at some point people say, that went too far. Let's back off. And that's how I'm seeing this.
One person explicitly said to me, like, I'm here to meet a spouse. Like, I want to get married and I came here to meet someone. And he also said, I know lots of other people who are here for that same reason. No one else was brave enough to say that to me.
Right.
But I'm sure he was right. The gender ratio was not great for that purpose because there were a lot more men than women, and some people who had been to Vibe Camp, the previous one, which I hadn't been to, said that the generation was better at the previous ones. There were fewer women, or maybe this one attracted more men relative to to the additional participants. There were, but I think I heard the number I heard thrown around was around 700 people, and people said that the previous one was about half that size. So it seems like maybe the I don't know, the rationality community was not a great place to meet a spouse. And this was an attempt to do better, but I'm not sure how much better they did given the gender ratio.
Right. So one, you could certainly imagine 28-year-old people wanting to go to events that were more gender balanced. And if the rationality community previously was lopsided, then they might have been looking strictly for a way to do an event that would be less lopsided. And then if they previously succeeded, then you could also imagine lots of men heard about that and say, oh, here's a less gender lopsided event. Let's go to that. And they preferentially, just piled on and made it more lopsided.
One question you got asked by Ayla at the first night's Q&A is like, what can be done about the gender imbalance? And I think Ayla hopes that you would spontaneously come up with a new institution that would magically solve this problem. You greatly disappointed her, but maybe you can give your answer and then see whether you have produced any better version of your answer in the meanwhile.
I don't think I gave a very good answer.
Okay. You can just said, give a new answer.
I basically said, this is a hard problem. And, they were mentioning things like, well, let's just make it cheaper for women, say, to go. And I mean, you can do that, but then that tends to send a bad signal. Right. Sure. It does. It can send a bad signal about, yeah. I mean, you want people to feel like the women are going more because they like it, not because they're getting a cheaper price. So, I would think there are these systematic differences in the kinds of things men and women like to do, and you just want to emphasize the kinds of things women like. So if it's dancing and music or arts or, whatever kinds of events they would more like, probably fewer lectures, probably fewer debates, fewer physical contests, maybe, whatever they like. But what do you think?
So I was really struck by how many autistic women were there. And by autistic women, I mean women who, unprompted, I was talking to them and told me they were autistic. Like, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 women were explicit about that. And then there were a lot more who I judged were probably autistic. So whatever they're doing is working really well to attract the autistic women. So, but maybe maybe not as well to attract non-autistic women. Maybe also I'm less of an expert on how to attract them.
I mean, it did seem like the men minded that being the kind of woman who was there. So I would lean into that. If you can find more ways to attract them, then do it.
Right. There's you're dealing with a smaller population in the first place. I wanted to go back to your question about, to your comment about the accommodating more to the nerdy autistic temperament. Did you feel the old rationalism did that more, or the new, what do we call it? Nice rationalism does that more? Which of those fits that better? I actually couldn't tell what you were saying there.
I guess what I mean is the older rationalists or more traditional rationalists were seeing their distinctive feature as a big positive and seeing their role in the world as pushing on their distinctive feature out into the world to make the world more reflect what they are. They had an agenda and a cause of, we're going to make the world more like us, and we're going to make the world listen to us because we know good things, and we are going to, contribute to the world through our rationality, which is, of course, another label for nerdy, really, that they're framing it as, we've got this superpower that the world needs, and we're going to develop it and hone it and apply it and spread it.
Right.
And that may not be really the best thing for this group of people in terms of like finding each other and having a happy life. Maybe those should be moderating maybe their differences from everybody else rather than trying to accentuate it.
I see. Okay. So the idea is like the current version is not so much leaning into being autistic or being a nerdy as a superpower. It's more about how do you navigate the world in a way that leaves you like happy and connected when you are autistic and nerdy.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's something that struck me that supports your hypothesis, specifically the part about like humility versus arrogance. Like maybe that if anything characterizes the shift from rationalism to post-rationalism or teapot or whatever you want to call the new thing, it's the move from arrogance to humility, which is that a number of times the organizers said, both before the event, during the event at the beginning, and at the end, that when you talk to people, you're not supposed to try to impress them. And the biggest virtue at the end was described. I saw all these people who were not trying to impress other people. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, wait, why isn't that good? I like it when people try to impress me, especially when they succeed. That means they were impressive and they're interesting and fun. But there's this idea of like the fundamental ethos is a certain kind of, we're not playing status games and we're humble, versus the fundamental ethos of the old rationalist movement is something like we can play status games by leveraging our superpowers, whatever they are, and we can create a new kind of status where we're the winners.
I think there's some truth to that. I think there's also just a context of there's a whole world out there that's for many decades of people who specialize in retreats and, places you go on a trip to find yourself and to meditate and to, do many things. And I think, what you're hearing about this humility is really kind of that standard package. So it may be just the retreat concept here is more like just be less this weird distinctive thing and just go back more to the usual of what people tend to say that they're trying to do at these sorts of things.
So, I mean, I really think that in particular, the emotional vibe campers were trying to like break through the normal ways that people interact, not to replicate the way they interact on vacation or something, but to break through it and create like a new environment where there'd be like a new equilibrium. And like to some degree they were successful, but I don't think it's just like take time off from your daily life and relax or something.
So I mean to distinguish resorts and vacations from retreats and development events or whatever. So if you go to, I don't know, Burning Man or something, it's not just a retreat.
Right.
It's a place where, there's meditation and lectures and discussions about how you will, find yourself and, develop yourself emotionally. I mean, there's a whole world of those things, which aren't just ordinary vacation retreats.
I'd just be really surprised if anyone of the organizers at Burning Man at any point said, don't try to seem impressive. Like, I just doubt that would be stated as an explicit message. So I feel like that was an ethos that was like self-consciously taken up and then repeated in a way that does make this group distinctive, and it's connected up with the ethos of being nice. Any group can be walked into. I'm sure that's not true of Burning Man. I'm sure there are clusters of people, and you don't really feel like you can join the people who are dressed differently from you or whatever. I've not been there, so I don't know. There may be certain forms of openness that are present there that are not present in the outside, but it doesn't purport to be somehow like totally or especially open.
So the word woo was invoked.
Yeah, people said that to me all the time, and I kind of don't know what it means, even though I kept saying that to people and inviting them to explain it to me.
Right.
Mystery forces that are not described by science.
Yeah. So I mean, there were events for. I mean, there were probably people doing drugs, for example, psychedelics.
So drugs are more.
Well, they can be if they're trying to get you to have an alternative state of consciousness to expand your sense of the universe or whatever.
Okay.
And there were these events where people talked about those sorts of things. We didn't go, but it seemed like part of the organizing concept was a tolerance and acceptance of that, because in a sense, that is something that traditional rationalists just said no.
I see.
Like, that's part of the traditional rationality is say, no, woo is not rational. We're not going to be woo here. And so that's part of the retreat or compromise. They were saying, well, we're going to go there. And I think, there are some essays about this, but I think part of the concept is to say, you can't just trust your mind to calculate everything about your life. There's some ways in which, you inherit human behaviors and styles that you don't fully understand, and you need to, and somewhat, continue those. And therefore, you're sort of being less ambitious about what you can reason through in your life and what you can reason through in how you behave and interact with people. And that's somewhat contrary to the more ambitious concept of we have a superpower that we can figure all this stuff out.
So it seems like you have two theories about the relationship between old school rationalism and these new people. One of them is that these people are in some way trying to be more normal or trying to accommodate or fit into the world to a greater degree than rising above it. And the other is that they are rebelling or reacting against the rationalists. Those are not incompatible, but there are places where they don't come together, like the woo is one example, because woo would be considered weird by the outside world. It doesn't make you more normal. It doesn't make it easier to fit in if you believe in these alternative transcendental experiences. And so that makes it seem like actually the kind of backlash effect of being a bit of an anti-rationalist is maybe stronger than the normalizing effect.
Well, maybe they're just wrong, but I think in their minds, in fact, they think most people are kind of woo.
Ah.
Most people are somewhat religious. Most people, even if they're not explicitly religious, are superstitious in many ways. They are
religious people mostly don't do drugs or believe in like alternative states of consciousness. That's a weird fringe thing.
But from their point of view, it's part of this larger world of the more ordinary thing that they're going back to. So they may just be failing.
Okay. Or it may be that they've partly constructed their sense of what is the ordinary thing we're going back to just by rebelling against whatever is not like the other thing. I don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question.
What were some of your favorite features of vibecamp? What did you really like about it?
Well, of course, I like being on stage myself personally. And I thought the initial ice-breaking polls were great. That was very inventive, and I hope it spreads and a lot of people do that more.
Wait, I want to pause for a second because I wanted to tell people like so these were Ayla, who is a sex worker, and she's on Twitter and I don't know, on a lot of podcasts and things. She sort of stood at the front of a large quote unquote amphitheater that was not an amphitheater of people and asked like, are you X or Y? And then we were supposed to move to one side or the other side of the room. I'll give you some examples, but I won't give some of the spicier examples in case Ayla didn't want them revealed. Are you better at sex than the average person here? Do you have higher or lower IQ than the average person here? Are you more or less conservative than the average person here? We had to rank ourselves by the number of sexual partners that we had without talking, just by like looking at each other and organizing ourselves in a loop of two extremes. And then we had to reveal it and then reorganize ourselves to see how close we had been to right. Free will, yes or no? Are you queer? Have you been to an orgy? Are you a materialist or not? Have you committed a serious crime? That was another one. We had to rank ourselves along a spectrum of how serious a crime have you committed? Do you want to get married? Okay, here was the one that Robin and I both liked best, though I talked to some people for whom it was more relevant and they said it made them incredibly uncomfortable. So she said, look around you. This is to the whole group. Look around you. Is there anyone you've met here so far that you'd want to have sex with? If yes, stay on this side of the room. If not, go over to the other side. Pause. Okay. Now, if the person you want to have sex with went over to the other side, you go over to the other side. And then she sort of kept doing that until there was like a relatively small group of people left who presumably all wanted to have sex with each other. And I actually don't recall, what did she say to them at that point? Do you remember, Rana?
She said, look at each other and consider.
Yeah, because right. So I talked to people who were like, that made them incredibly uncomfortable because like they were in the group, you and I exited that group very immediately. So it was fun for us to watch this.
But I think it's worth noting that, the themes here are somewhat, I guess liberal, honestly. Like on a political spectrum, we're talking, some pretty liberal sorts of behaviors and topics here, including the drugs and maybe the openness about the sex or even the sex worker, right? And yet, when the question was, are you more conservative than the median person here? It was like more than half went on the conservative side. So they
all of us themselves more conservative than the median, or not all, most of us. Yeah, right. I picked that too.
So, that can be part of what they're reacting to, I think. And they also asked a question about controversy or something. So I think there was a perception that the other groups they were reacting to were more liberal, or there was more of a liberal orthodoxy, and that they were moving away from that too. And that's why they were more inclusive of people who had been canceled or more conservative. So they saw themselves as more including that. And there were some people there who I guess I won't name because I don't know if I have the permission, who represented more conservative points of view, who you could take as feeling more welcome there because of that self-branding. But in some objective sense, come on, given these things we're talking about, this is not liberal.
So another thing that came up over and over again in my interviews of people was how little politics came up over the course of the 4 days. So these are people who didn't know each other, having a lot of intense conversations with some intellectual content. And some people were like, people politically were we learned at the polls were spread pretty far apart. And people were surprised by the fact that just never came up in all the interpersonal interactions. So like, yes, the conservative people may have felt comfortable, but not because anyone welcomed their conservative beliefs or something, but more because they just didn't enter into the conversation.
I think that is the key thing. They're perceiving these, I guess they call them woke worlds, where there are these strong pressures to conform to particular political views. And the thing they liked about this was the lack of those pressures.
Okay. And so going back to, I interrupted you. You were saying the things you like. Is that a thing you liked about this environment?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely felt that there was less ideological pressure, and you were less going to be judged on conformity to some ideological metrics, and less afraid or concerned that you would say the wrong thing and everybody would be mad at you. Yeah, that was part of the idea. That I liked. So I think you have an interesting observation that you asked people about whether they'd want to grow this event and have more people come, and they didn't. And that suggests this sense of an in-group they want to protect. So even there's some sense of they've got a precious group of a thing that they like, and they are afraid of invaders hurting them. So it might be this, ideological pressures they're afraid of invading, or something else. I'm not sure, but that's a plausible candidate.
To me, that was really striking. So it was striking for two reasons. First of all, which is like, obviously I only interviewed maybe 20 people, or I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 total. But how unanimous they were on this one question. I would ask them things like, what do you want the outside world to know about vibecamp? And they're like, nothing. People, they'll come in and they'll ruin it. And I was like, but why wouldn't you think that there would be the same selection effect? That the people who hear, if we represent it accurately, then the people who come will just be people like you, who are the people who would enjoy it. They're like, it's good if there are obstacles to people finding out about it. Because then we'll get the right people. It's like in Judaism, there's a rule, if you want to convert, you have to be turned down 3 times. There's like a 5 camp. We got to hide it so that you have to pass through 3 trials or whatever. Yeah. So it was very striking to me partly because the fundamental ethos was this ethos of openness and acceptance. And we just want everyone to feel comfortable who's already here. But on the outside, we want to be closed and we don't want them to come. And I wonder if somehow those things come at the price of one another, that you feel like you can be open and accepting if you also feel like you've closed the group.
Like I say, my best candidate explanation here is this fear of some outside policing, that there are these people outside who successfully enforced conformity to their norms in lots of other groups. And they don't want
Why
those
not
people
think
coming
that, why not fear that someone on the inside is going to do that?
in, I guess, because the people on the inside have said they don't like that stuff that's happening on the outside, but they're afraid of more people on the outside coming in, right? So,
But like, so like when two people on the inside are interacting, they're in effect giving each other the benefit of the doubt. They don't need to do a ton of signaling to prove that they're on the right side, etc. They should have trust, right? The quote unquote outsiders who would be coming, I mean, they would be coming because they like found out about all this stuff and it was attractive to them. And yet they don't want to give that trust to those people. They don't have much more of a reason to think that those people are the good guys than the people who are already there, I think.
so if the thing became publicized, say, and it got some high profile media coverage and people were talking about it, then it might be a target for someone trying to take it down. And then somebody might go just in order to take notes and expose.
Yes.
And that might be the sort of thing they're afraid of, is the infiltrators trying to expose them, trying to, trick people into saying things that can be interpreted as bad, and then telling everybody this is bad.
Yeah. So one thing one person said is that the outside world is inherently suspicious of a group of people who feel comfortable with each other and uncomfortable with what's on the outside. Right. Of course, the only thing that really makes this group of people comfortable with each other is that they've decided to be, if my theory is correct, is they've decided to be comfortable with each other. Like they've just kind of collectively decided we're going to be open and accepting and whatever. So
I think there was an element of especially inviting and bonding with people who had been somewhat canceled by some other world.
I don't think that's true. That's true of you, but most people in that, most of the 700 people were not famous and had not been canceled. The vast majority. Yeah, I mean, it's true that Ayla asked you, she asked you what was your favorite cancellation?
But she's also someone who's been somewhat canceled.
Right, exactly. So you two were bonding over being canceled.
Right.
And that was one of the early events. But like that really, so all that stuff did not come up in my conversations with people.
No, but
that
like
wasn't a topic for discussion.
But like the dating event we saw, like, and in some sense, I think they were teasing and taunting with going near canceled topics, right?
Yeah.
As a way to bond the audience together, right?
That's true. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I wanted to go back.
And that's the sort of thing that people could be afraid would be exposed by an outsider coming in and quoting things or something.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you liked, so far we have said you liked the event where you were on the stage and the fact that people were not imposing woke norms on you. Anything else?
I mean, I like just to talk to a lot of people. I like to talk to a lot of people.
I'm gonna give an observation. Yeah, so folk dancing. So this is not just us. A lot of people who I asked, folk dancing was their favorite event. So that was just, to me, like the surprise hit event. It was so fun. And I think it was just fun to feel that you could like move quickly among this group of people and that sort of works. And I'm not even saying it works like without bumping into them or stepping on each ot's toes. We did bump into each other and step on each other's toes. That somehow it didn't matter. And like it was very fun. And I think next time there should be like multiple rounds of folk dancing. Like I always go to everyone. But me observing you, I would say you just seemed really happy. And you in particular seemed really happy with the people were just like coming up to you and talking. And kind of open and willing to talk to people. And it sort of seemed like you had an infinite amount of energy for that. Like I would get tired, but you just still keep going and starting another conversation, etc. And I think it was a very by comparison with the usual camping experience or something, like it was a place to have conversations, much more so than like a conference even, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, in some sense, that would be my overall summary here, to say, well, there's a nice combination of, so many sort of rationality type events would be a conference or a talk or something, right? Or a discussion group. And then a more normal human event would be just some sort of a fun vacation like at a camp. And the idea was, well, there's a nice middle combination of that here that works. Um, you don't want to just go to a resort and sit by the pool, you know, and mix with every ordinary people at the pool or whatever. And you don't want to just have a nerdy discussion event. You want to do this middle thing. That's the idea, and there's a nice compromise there. You want to be around the sort of people you would be talking about at the conference, but you want to not be so stressed or putting on a pretense or being full of yourself as much as you would be at the conference or the talk. You want to be in a relaxed, accepting mood like you would be at a camp, doing some campy things. That's a good combination that the claim would be, and there's a synergy there that works.
Okay, I want to ask a few more questions about the idea of like the niceness anti-status ethos, or anti-status games ethos. Because I'm really interested in the question of whether that fundamentally makes sense. So I'll just say something that so here's two things that people said to me. One of them was, in this environment, I found it much easier to calibrate my strengths and weaknesses against other people. And like I could like see how much I had to say about one topic versus another, like which is to say, like, it was actually easier to do these, in some sense, a certain kind of status comparison than it would have otherwise been. He's like, there's stuff where I thought I knew a lot about it, and I talked to other people, and I'm like, oh, they know way more than me. Whereas the other stuff where I was like, oh, I turned out to be way better at talking about somebody. Okay, so that was the first. And here's the second one. The second one was, there was a couple of people who said this. They said, but I'm going to quote the phrase, I unlocked a new insecurity of not being interesting enough, which is that, like, it's like, I realize that I'm usually around people who are kind of boring. But around these people, like a lot of these people have some cool thing that they're into, or some like, hobby, or their job has some cool thing or whatever. And I don't have a cool thing that I can talk about. And so they ended up actually feeling insecure for sort of not like having, some distinguishing mark in their back pocket to pull out. So that's sort of to suggest that it could be that the kind of openness and getting straight to the matter of vibecamp removes the protective coating of bullshit small talk by which we insulate one another from all these differences in knowledge, expertise, and intelligence.
Well, let me give some examples to illustrate a point. Like in my life, so nerds and autistic people are often especially stressed by social situations because they feel a lot of rejection in typical social situations, and therefore they're very anxious about it. And then that will carry over even when they're hanging out with other nerds, because they're not really sure how nerdy everybody is, and they still think, they're going to be judged harshly by the social standards. And so, I was that sort of person. And then in my life, I overcame that in giving speeches when I decided I didn't really care about my audience. I didn't respect them. So I wasn't going to be so anxious about what they thought of my speech. And in dating, I became more comfortable dating when I just, for a while, gave up. And I said, that's never going to happen. I'll just talk to people. And then, I'm not making a pitch here. So there's a sense in which I probably generalize other people that nerdy people get so stressed about social situations and status and how accept they are that they just lock down and are hard. So if you can just break them out of that somehow, where they just, in whatever situation is, that stuff doesn't count or it's not relevant, or that for now they're just going to ignore it, then somehow they can, in fact, be more social and naturally interactive and then learn things about that, and that helps them.
Yeah, but so, it worked out for you, but like, what about the person who, like, they can be more social, now they realize they suck? Like, they were shielded from that knowledge before they interacted with other people and compared themselves. But
Okay, but I still progress from that. So the idea here might be just the ethos of this vibe story is, relax, chill. We're here having fun. Don't worry about it. Enjoy yourself. And that ethos lets people set aside all their usual anxiety for a moment, and
okay.
then they expose themselves to each other. And then they learn some things, but it's less stressful because they were less in that stressful state of mind.
So maybe it's like what you're really saying is like it's an environment of socially fake it till you make it. Like we're all gonna have this like nice friendly exterior of openness, and as though we knew how to socialize, we're gonna pretend we know how to socialize.
Yeah.
And then by pretending we know how to socialize, eventually we'll be able to socialize. None of that touches the question of like how good are we at stuff or how interesting are we or whatever. That's independent.
Right.
But you can learn. So you're going to learn some stuff about how to socialize by pretending you
Right.
already know how to do it.
So remember, the key thing most people said was about the feeling of acceptance here, right?
Yes.
That the most distinctive feature about this event in their minds was, I feel accepted here. I feel we're all accepting each other. I like the
Yes.
fact that we're all feeling accepted. So that's very relevant here, right? If we're all feeling accepted, then we're less stressed about rejection. And then we can just try out social styles and see what happens, less fearing the rejection that we would otherwise get elsewhere.
Right. So, like, okay. So let me get to like the thing that really puzzles me about this. It's like, um, sometimes children will have, and even adults will have this thought, why can't everyone just be nice and get along and be friendly
Right.
and be accepting? Right. And then adults will be like, it's not that simple. And so is Vibe Camp just sort of saying it is that simple? Just be nice, and everybody can just do that. Clearly, that's kind of what everyone wants at the end of the day, but we're not able to get
Yes.
ourselves into it because we are trapped into playing a status game.
Actually,
But if we suck at them, then we'll end up doing the thing we actually wanted.
a standard story is that, say, alcohol allows people to not pay as much attention to the stressors for a moment, for a bit, and then be more open socially to each other. And then people get along better with alcohol, right? The standard story about alcohol smoothing social relations. And apparently, when you do randomized trials and you have people drink stuff they think is alcohol but isn't, they do the same thing. They act a little more tipsy and a little more accepting and a little more expressive. And again, it's about the expectation that drinking alcohol will allow that, and therefore there'll be less complaint or you'll be less severely evaluated for your styles if you're known to be drinking alcohol, and you will be more accepting of other people. And that's the thing that alcohol supposedly does. And you could think of that as this is just another version of it. Once you create the expectation that we will be accepting, then for a while it works.
Okay, so you think alcohol makes people more accepting? Like if a group of people is a bit drunk, then if someone comes from the outside and tries to join their group, they're going to be nicer to that person than if they weren't drunk?
I mean, more specifically, things you do while drunk, you'll be less criticized for them. The standards will be lowered for particular behaviors. So you can be less afraid of being rejected for particular things you do or say when you're drunk.
Okay, but we also need to explain people not doing the rejecting because, contrary to everyone's beliefs, they're also the people on the other side who are rejecting other people and looking down on them. We are both of those humans, right? And so we also have to inhibit that. We have to inhibit the behaviors in ourselves that would make someone else uncomfortable when they want to join our group. And people were clearly doing that. And I don't know if alcohol would explain that. So, but maybe
Well,
the acceptance mantra or something explains it.
I mean, so the literal alcohol theory is that under the influence of alcohol, you are just less able to notice whether you're following rules or not, or whether you're criticizable or not, or whether other people are following rules or not, whether they're criticizable. You're just less good at noticing violations that you could jump on of yourself or other people. You're just inhibited from noticing those things and calculating them and calling them to people's attention subtly. And so you just do it less.
Okay, I want to raise one more thing that really only one person brought this up on me, but I thought it was interesting. So she was, in fact, the person who said the thing about how everyone's inclined to have a long conversation about any topic and no time is wasted to reach depth. But actually, she did not mean that as a compliment, it turned out. So it turned out she got trapped in a lot of long conversations, like deep conversations immediately that she didn't necessarily want to be in. And she kind of didn't feel like she could just walk out of the conversations. And I thought this was interesting because I think that among this group of people, there was a kind of shift in the division of labor of how much we do explicitly versus implicitly. So there was a lot of, can I join your group? Or are you busy? Do you need time alone? Or can I talk to you, etc. One person in a group that I was talking in raised her hand when she wanted to say something. So there was a lot of being explicit about the interaction. And but that didn't replace all the implicit norms. It just got layered on top of them, right? And so this woman, who was raised in the outside world where we have a bunch of implicit norms, I'm sure the person she was talking to would have been fine if she had said, I need to go now, or, I don't want to keep having this conversation or whatever. They probably would have been fine with it. But she didn't, or maybe not. I mean, maybe part of acceptance is that you can't say that. I don't know. But it's sort of, to me, that case illustrated the difficulty of the kind of acceptance and explicitness ethos, which is that it just doesn't really seem actually possible to be sort of sensitive to everyone all of the time. I'm not sure how to sum it up. I'm just going to let you say something.
So usually nerdy people around ordinary people, the nerdy people are less able to read subtle social cues, and they're less able to send subtle social signals. So they often have to ask explicit questions and make explicit declarations. Around ordinary people, people notice they are that, in some sense, socially impaired in that way. And that's a reason why they're rejected and feel uncomfortable around other people doing that. So here we induce the change where everybody gets to do it and it's okay. You're accepted, so you're less stressed by the awkwardness of doing it. You can more do it, but it doesn't mean you become socially more skilled immediately. I mean, you are in fact going to be more explicit because you are less able to read clues, and that's going to continue here, right? You're trying to still be, for someone who can't read these situations as well and can't communicate as subtly. So you're going to be nerdy people doing the more explicit nerdy thing, but at least you're not stressed by being rejected about it. You're all agreeing that.
So it's basically nerdy bullying. A bunch of nerds bullying other people, bullying the non-nerds, right? That is the whole point. Part of the point is your understanding of this sort of event is actually taking this nerdy community and softening the edges and opening it up to the nerd adjacent groups, right? But those people are going to be systematically bullied by these nerds. In that the nerds are not going to be able to read the implicit signals, and the non-nerds are going to still be sensitive to the explicit ones.
Privilege might be too strong, but you might say, if your usual social practice is tuned to the usual level of subtlety, and you're good at that, then you won't be good at this, because this world is going to ride more on the explicit things. And if you're just not as good at doing the explicit things, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
Okay, I want to do a whole other podcast on this topic of are people with low social skills harmful? People harm them? That's a really good topic. But we have to stop with this one. But I want to ask you 2 questions. So are you going to go back to Sidekick?
I'm leaning in that direction. I mean,
what probability
being into else might goes? 50-50, I guess.
50-50 is not leaning in that direction, Robin.
54. 66,
okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And then finally, I'm just gonna close with one of the A-list questions. If you had to have sex with either a live cow or a dead cow, which do you pick?
Dead, I guess.
Okay.
And you? Are you going?
I feel I was the one answering the questions here.
No, but are you going to go?
Am I going to go?
What's
I
your
would
odds
put
of
it
that?
higher than 54% or whatever. I would put it at
Okay.
like 70% that I will go. Yeah,
Well, maybe bring your family.
maybe. Yes. I'm glad you didn't answer the cow question. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.